Hi. Hello. Let's just go ahead and get the elephant out of the way, shall we? Yes, I have bangs. Yes, I impulsively cut them myself. No, I was not in emotional distress when I did it. I just randomly woke up one day and thought, wow, I think I would look good with bangs. And then came home from work and did it. And I really like them. I think they look good. I like FaceTimed my mom and she thinks they look good. And quite honestly, that's really all that matters. As long as I like them and my mother likes them, I don't care what anyone else thinks. So yeah, I have bangs. Moving on. Happy New Year. I already recorded a video in which I say Happy New Year, but I'm not sure in what order I'm going to post these videos. And I think that will largely depend on when I get around to editing them. So if this one is going up first, Happy New Year, happy 2025. I hope you had a lovely holidays. Un momento. Okay, we're gonna try that again. I got interrupted by a phone call that I needed to take. But it's good because when I stopped recording, I realized I don't know if my mic was on and recording. Hopefully it was. But now I know for sure that it's on. So I can proceed. If you are in a clinical psychology PhD program, then you may or may not have spent your entire winter break working on externship applications. And that means you probably have interviews coming up. And so that's why I'm here. Having now gone through 2 rounds of externship applications and interviews, I thought I could come on here and just like I've done with PhD program interviews, give you all a sense of what questions you might get asked, what questions you can ask your interviewers that might be helpful to gather some information. And hopefully by watching this video, you will feel a bit more prepared. So with that, let's just jump right in. Hey, hello, my name is JoJo and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, welcome. Okay, so I'm actually gonna try to go through this list fairly quickly because I do have a lot of questions on this list. I have a list of like 10 questions that you might get asked, and then I have a list of like 5 questions that I have asked my interviewers in externship interviews, just to like try to get a sense of the vibe of the program and also like the vibe of the externship directors. So let me backtrack a little bit and first go over some of like just the basics. If you're interviewing for externships, specifically, let me be more specific because I interviewed with programs who interview students through the NinjaDot system of APA. So NinjaDot covers New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. I'm not sure if other states use NinjaDot, so I just want to make it very clear that I interviewed with programs via NinjaDot. And so some of the things I mentioned may not apply to you if you are located on like the West Coast or in the Midwest. So I'm just putting that disclaimer out there now. 9 times out of 10, your interview is going to be 30 minutes, max 45. I don't think I have ever had a single externship interview that lasted a full hour. If you do not worry, the time flies. A couple of my internship interviews this year lasted a full hour. Like my actual interview with the interviewer was a full hour. And when I tell you it felt like 10 minutes, I mean that because you don't even realize how much you're talking in interviews, I think most of the time. So that's the first thing. Your interviews will more than likely be 30 to 45 minutes long. In very rare instances, a full hour. Something I didn't encounter in my first externship interview cycle that I did encounter in my second is second interviews. The first year that I applied for externships, I had gotten an acceptance for the externship that was my top choice prior to me interviewing for other sites that I had applied to and got interview offers for. I could explain how that happened in this video, but I won't, because I think I have like a whole other video where I explained how and why that happened. And I will link it above if you're interested in hearing about that, but I won't explain that here. But because of that, I only interviewed in one place. As far as I'm aware, none of my cohort members experienced like first and second interviews. I don't really think that was a thing up until last year. So last year when I applied for externships, quite a few of us got interview invitations from places where they distinctly said, your first interview is on this date with this person, your second interview is on this date with this other person. And that was a shock to a lot of us. We were like, since when are they doing 2 interviews? So I don't know whether or not that will be the case this year, but just know that that is a possibility. You may get 1 interview and that'll be it, or you may get 2 interviews. Even if you do 2 interviews, know that both of those interviews will be 30 to 45 minutes long, very rarely a full hour. So with that being said, let me just jump right in. I don't want this video to get too long. So we'll just start with question number 1. So naturally, starting off the interview, there is a very good chance that the first question will be some version of tell me about yourself. How you answer this question will very much depend on how you want to represent yourself to your interviewers. For me, I typically answer this question starting with all of my identifiers that I like people to know about me. And then I continue on with information about me that they wouldn't necessarily know from directly reading my CV. You don't necessarily want to focus on academic or clinical experience when you're responding to this question, because they can see that in your CV. Try to instead approach this question from, what do I want them to know about me that they wouldn't be able to see in my application? That is sort of the best way I can frame how I would recommend responding to this. The second question you might get is, what attracted you to our program? Make sure you can answer this one, and make sure that you can be as specific as possible, because it will tell them about how much research you have actually done about their program and what they offer. So you don't want to say something like, I'm attracted to your program because of the amazing learning opportunities you offer. Way too vague. Every program offers amazing learning opportunities. Be specific. Does their program cater to a specific population that you want to work with? Does their program offer a specific group or a specific kind of therapy that you want to get experience in? These are the sort of answers that they want to hear, because it means that you've done your homework. Number 3 sort of goes hand in hand with number 2, which is they might actually specifically ask what kinds of training experiences you are looking for in your externship. So they may ask, what attracted you to our program? And or they may ask, what kind of training opportunities are you looking for? The way you respond to each of these should be the same. You want to be specific. You don't want to be too vague, because ultimately what these questions are doing for them is helping them gauge whether or not you are a right fit for their program. If you're saying that you want training opportunities that their program does not offer, their first thought is going to be, okay, why did you apply here, right? My voice is going out. I don't know why. I did a lot of talking on the phone call I had, so that might be it. And now I'm doing a lot of talking for this video. So I apologize if my voice is going in and out. I really cannot control it. So moving on, question number 4 that you might get asked is, what is your therapeutic approach? Again, they're gauging fit. So be honest. Be honest if you want to. If you practice primarily from a psychodynamic approach and you're interviewing for a CBT site, why? But also, if you practice primarily from a psychodynamic approach and you're interviewing at a CBT focused site, but you want more CBT experience, then explain that in your response. Or if you're interviewing for a CBT oriented site, but you're more psychodynamic, but you're just trying to up your chances of matching at an externship, because sure, why not? Then like, yeah, you can lie if you want to. I can't imagine that you'll be particularly happy at that site, which is why I encourage honesty, but you're free to do what you want. The next question you might get asked, number 5, is tell me about a clinical mistake that you have made and how you learned from it. My number 1 recommendation with this question is be genuine in your response. Do not come up with some very shallow thing like, I don't even know if I can think of an example of what would be like a shallow response. I don't know. I can't think of something right now, but what I'm trying to communicate is like when you're thinking about a response to this question, have an example that like truly meant something to the work that you were doing with the patient that you might bring in. In describing what the clinical mistake was, you want in some way to show how it impacted the treatment and how you overcame or worked through whatever impact it had. And then you want to explain how making that mistake and working through that mistake has now impacted how you work with other patients going forward. And so that's what I mean when I say it should be a very genuine, really thought out response and not shallow, because ultimately you want there to be like a long-term implication for whatever you're talking about. Also with this question, how you communicate your response will matter. You want to make sure that the mistake you're describing does not in any way come off sounding like you caused any actual harm to the patient, either mentally, emotionally, or physically, okay? A similar question that you might get asked that's not patient focused, but more supervisor focused is tell me about a conflict you had with the supervisor. Plain and simple. Again, you want this response to be very well thought out. You want it to be genuine. You don't want it to be anything shallow. What they are trying to see through this question is how you handle conflict, and specifically how you handle conflict in a power differential. Because inherently, even though supervisors like to do their best to address, and well, hopefully your supervisors try to do their best to acknowledge and also limit the existence of like a major power differential between the two of you, there's always going to be one. And so they want to see how you handle conflict in these scenarios. They want to see how you navigate those conflicts and problem solve. So again, similar to the previous question, whatever conflict you choose to discuss in this response, you want to make sure that you highlight not just what the conflict was, but how you overcame the conflict with that supervisor, or if you didn't overcome that conflict, what you learned from that conflict, and then in either of those cases, how whatever you learned from that conflict has helped you grow as either a clinician or a trainee, and how you approach supervisor relationships going forward in your training. Okay, so number 7 and number 8, again, sort of go hand in hand. You can either get, tell me about a case, or you can get, tell me about a difficult case. In either of these scenarios, you want to make sure that the case you have prepared to discuss has relevance to the site that you are interviewing for. And again, this is because fit. Ultimately, everything here is about fit. You want to make sure that you and the program that you're interviewing for are on the same level, okay? You want to make sure that y'all are here. In the first question, where you might get asked very vaguely to talk about a case, this is how I recommend you go about it. You don't necessarily have to approach it this way, but this is how I have approached it and how I've been told I should approach the question. So that's what I'm going to share. First, you want to make sure that you provide very limited identifying information. All you really want to share is the patient's age, ethno-racial identity, their gender and or sexual identity, and presenting problem / diagnosis if you gave them one. Then you want to follow that up with a very brief conceptualization of the case, how you conceptualized the patient's presenting problem. Then you want to follow that with a brief sort of overview of the timeline of the case. So beginning, middle, end. At the beginning of our treatment, X, Y, and Z happened. Around the middle of treatment, X, Y, and Z happened, and this was a change because X, Y, and Z. As we approached termination, X, Y, and Z happened. I did X, Y, and Z with the patient. Their symptoms either improved or didn't improve because of X, Y, and Z. That is sort of generally how you want to approach the more vague, like, tell me about a case. If you get tell me about a difficult case, then there are a bit of tweaks to that. Again, very limited identifying information, same as before. In this case, you can, if you want to, include a conceptualization of the case, but that's not as necessary, I would say. And you don't have to include a timeline of the case. Instead, you want to focus on a challenge that you came up against in the case with the patient and how you overcame that challenge together, okay? How whatever challenge came up in the work, you worked together with the patient to overcome. And then you want to talk about how that has impacted your work moving forward. So those are the ways I would recommend preparing responses to each of those. How long have I been recording? Shit. Okay. I'm really trying to speed through these. Number 9, this was probably the biggest curveball question I've ever gotten. And it was, tell me what it is you are reading. And when I got this question, I asked for clarification. I was like, what I'm reading? And they were like, yeah, like in terms of like, you know, psychological theory, like what sorts of readings or authors do you find yourself pulling from? And so my number one recommendation for this question is, however you answer this question, do not lie, okay? Do not lie. Do not throw out a random name if you cannot in some way, shape, or form describe the work of that person. When I got this question, I started throwing out some names that I was familiar with, and one of their immediate follow-up questions was about one of the authors that I had named and what I had read specifically. And thankfully, I was able to name a paper that I had actually really liked by that author, and describe a little bit about what I liked about that paper. So when I say do not lie, I mean that wholeheartedly. Do not lie, because if you get a follow-up question like that and you can't answer it, you have blown the entire interview. I can tell you that right now. I don't know how common this question is. I've gotten this question once in an interview, and it was a question that I was not at all prepared for. So I'm putting it to you all just in case. Okay, just in case. That is my only recommendation. Do not lie. And finally, another sort of curveball question that I've gotten is, what are you like in group settings? And in this case, they were referring to like in didactics or case conference or whatever. My thought about why they asked me this is, I have to assume that they were probably trying to gauge like what my personality type is, like, and how I might relate to other people. And also how, if and what I might be able to contribute. All I really can say about this question is, don't come off overly arrogant or confident. Like, don't say, oh yeah, I'm always the first one to speak. I love sharing my thoughts. I love sharing my ideas. Like, you can say that you love sharing your thoughts and ideas, but make sure that in some way, shape, or form, you indicate that you can also be an active listener and take things in and not always be the first one to like give your opinion. You want to communicate that you have a good balance of being able to offer up thoughts, ideas, and suggestions, and also receive them. So those are the 10 questions that I think it would be helpful to prepare responses for. Now, I think I said 5 earlier. It's actually, I just looked, it's actually a list of 6. I have a list of 6 questions that I have asked my interviewers when interviewing for externships that I feel like helped me decide whether or not the externship was a site I wanted to be at. So the first question is just like, what does a typical week in the program look like? This is just so I can get a sense of what the workload is. I want to get a sense of how many patients I'm going to be seeing, you know, how many supervision meetings am I going to have, how many didactics and seminars am I going to have, what days are mandatory versus like, is there some flexibility in the schedule, things like that. The second question is, what does supervision look like? I ask this primarily to get a sense of whether or not there are any like program-wide requirements that they have for supervision. So some sites might require that you show video in supervision. Some programs might require that you bring process notes to supervision. So I like to just get a sense of that ahead of time. Because I have like my own style of supervision that I like and that I find helps me the best. But this looks different for everyone. So this is more so just like I'm gauging whether or not I would feel comfortable with the type of supervision that is offered in the program. And I also want to get a sense of like, how much supervision am I going to be getting, right? Do I have one supervisor or do I have multiple supervisors? How long are the supervision meetings? How frequently am I meeting with these supervisors? Like I want to know all of that. Number 3, and this was a question that I only asked if I was feeling a bit like about supervision at the particular site. Depending on how they answered my second question, I would ask how supervisors and trainees were matched. If it was like whoever has availability that aligned with yours, which unfortunately is like typically how supervisors and trainees are matched. I did have one site tell me that like they send out like bios of their supervisors, and then the trainees can like list their preferences based on those bios, which I really liked. So again, this is just so I can get a sense of sort of like what supervision might look like. Supervision is really important in your training. And a lot of times some sites offer not great supervision, and I need to know that ahead of time. I need to know if the supervision I might get in your program is trash, plain and simple. Question number 4, I would ask this if the program offered assessment. And what I would ask is just like if they taught any tests that trainees might not be familiar with, or were trainees coming into the program expected to know the tests already. This was just for me to get a sense of like expectations. Number 5 is I would ask some sites like generally what the population of their clinic was. And I would ask this if it wasn't immediately clear on their website or in their like program directory page on the NinjaDot website, because I want to know what population your clinic caters to. I'm someone who like, I would apply for externships that I would hope were catering to underserved populations. And I had one externship actually tell me that they try to cater to those underserved populations, but ultimately the primary demographic that walks into their office are not those underserved populations. And that just like completely turned me off. I was like, so you just have it. So you're just saying that you serve underserved populations when you really don't. Okay. So that was more of like a values thing for me. And then finally, the last question that I would ask if I was feeling a bit, I guess bold, if I was feeling bold, and again, if I was feeling a bit like iffy about the program, I think I only actually asked this question in like 2 of my interviews, but I asked how the program strives to provide equitable care. But yeah, again, this is more of like a values thing for me. I wanted to make sure that the externships that I might end up at shared my same values. So yeah, those are all the questions that I have asked in interviews that might be helpful for you to ask. You can also ask like other questions, anything that you find is important to you and how you're evaluating these programs. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap this video up because my throat is starting to feel really raw. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully this video was helpful. If you are interviewing for externships over the next few weeks, I'm sending you nothing but good vibes and wishing you the best of luck in all of your interviews. You are going to get many, I just know you are, and everything will work out as it should. So with that being said, thank you for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end. I truly appreciate it. Leave me a comment down below if you have any questions or suggestions for future videos. As always, like, share, and subscribe, and click that little notification bell so you don't miss my next upload, and I'll see you in my next one.